Hebrews chapter 11. You can read that this week in full, right? It talks about the great, great people of faith. It starts out now faith. Now faith. That's right now faith, okay? It's being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Faith moves first, then God moves. Noah built before it ever rained. Can you imagine the ridicule that guy got building a boat? Abraham obeyed before he even knew exactly where he was going. Peter stepped out of the boat before the water even held him. And I love the disciples handing out little baskets. And it kept coming, and it kept coming, and it kept coming. They fed 5,000 people. Now, some of the greatest faith walkers today are small business owners, entrepreneurs, and especially farmers. I think of the contractor who buys equipment worth more than their own family house, trusting God that jobs will come in. A convenience store installs gas pumps for hundreds of thousands of dollars, not just to have convenient gas for their own vehicles, but because they believe customers will come. That's faith. A restaurant buys food before a single person orders a meal. Farmers bury very expensive seed into the ground, believing God will send rain and produce a harvest. The natural world calls that agriculture. Heaven calls it faith. You know a bag of seed these days is over $500? Yeah. If my grandpa was alive, he would shake his head. Now, the Bible shows that business and economics are not the world's idea. The world didn't invent this. They're God's. In Genesis 23, Abraham purchased land from Ephron. They made a legal agreement, weighed silver, and transferred ownership. God recorded it as righteous. See, faith in the business world looks like investing your time and money before a single profit comes in. Hiring people before the first sale happens. Buying inventory before customers show up. Planting seed with the faith for a harvest. And most of all, trusting God for what you cannot control. That is faith. Now, a lot of business people will say, I don't have a lot of faith. But look around. Look at how you've stretched yourself. You've stretched your faith. I think of Friends and Neighbors convenience store. Faith to buy equipment to buy or to roast chicken. You may laugh, but you just didn't buy that piece of equipment just for chicken on your, supper. And it's awesome chicken, by the way. Faith to buy equipment, not even knowing if anybody would buy any chicken, right? What's the end result? Blessing people with really good food and providing jobs to the locals. Ever since you added that broaster, I see more people employed there. That was faith. That was faith. One chicken broaster affects 1,000 people. It really does. And think of the opportunities they get. All of our cards we have for all the events sit on their counter and they hand them out all the time. Our signs hang in their store. People come to the convenience store not just for physical food, but also for spiritual things. Now, people of faith don't list excuses. They look for a way to trust God with the impossible. Faith doesn't say I can't. Faith says God can. Faith-filled people don't hunt for a reason why it won't work. They move forward and trust God to make a way. People of faith don't sit in the problem. They step out and let God handle the impossible. So what happens when you stood out in faith and you showed up last year for our business prayer Sunday and things didn't go like we prayed? What happens if you had a tough year? What happens if you suffered loss and it wasn't what you expected? What happens if you're 27 years old, you're newly married, and you buy this machine shop and you tell your new wife, well, you're going to have to work full time and then come to the shop and clean at night and do the bookwork? And what happens along the way if things are rough and the business is not making a go? But yet there's this ministry going on in your town that needed welding and fabrication, and you did it for free because there was an event that would change people's lives and they would find Jesus. But things didn't go. You served God, you gave it your best, but then things had to close. And as you're writing out the last bill and all the equipment is sold, you look and you're like, there's a little down payment for a house for my family. And God's just little blessing shows up in the midst of defeat. That's our story. Our first business completely failed, and we had to close the doors after 2 years. And you know what we did? Pull up our big girl panties, get back to work. And you know what? We trusted God through the whole thing. We didn't sit there and wallow that it didn't work. We learned something from it. Going through the toughest times built our faith even more. It doesn't make sense, but it does. You get stronger. You trust God harder. I will never, ever regret those times of sucking carpet, praying for jobs to come into that shop. It was the worst and the best times of our lives. We learned a lot. Deuteronomy 28 says, God blesses the work of our hands. Work of our hands, not wishes. Not complaining, not procrastinating. Blessing comes when we move. The disciples didn't see bread multiplied until they handed it out. Now, some of you have dreams, a business, a product, a coffee shop, maybe a new direction. Faith can't wait for perfection. It's just got to start with what you know, what you got in hand. The widow with the oil in the Old Testament didn't have much, but God multiplied what she was willing to move on. Faith doesn't look what's missing. Now, some of you are thinking, profit is evil. Blessing is evil. But it's not. It's not at all. The Bible never condemns wealth. It condemns greed. See, there's a difference. You have to steward it well. Now, some of you are thinking, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a business owner. This Sunday doesn't apply to me. Well, guess what? It does. Some are called to own businesses and some are called to work for bosses. And it's okay. Business ownership carries pressure, lots of stress, payroll, taxes, sometimes lawsuits, insurance, equipment, employees, risk. Business owners are nearly twice as likely to experience depression. Divorce rates are high among entrepreneurs. Some say they lose sleep, their health suffers, they have mental health issues. Now, not everyone is called to carry that weight. So staying faithfully in the lane that God has given you is the best. But if God calls you higher, step out. Now, as employees, you sometimes look over your spiritual job. The Bible speaks directly to workers in Colossians. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not your human masters. Be excellent. Be faithful. Now, the workplace that provides your paycheck is part of God's blessing in your life. Guess what? If that business grows, you grow. If the owner has just a little less stress in his life, he might just not take it out on you that day. Attitude matters. So when you're at work and you're looking out the door and the boss man pulls up in this brand new black Chevy Duramax, what do you think to yourself? Praise the Lord. Do you think, Just think of what he has to go through every day. So then he comes up to you and he says, Johnny, if you work hard this year and you put in some overtime and you don't screw up a bunch of orders, I'm going to buy another one for myself in red. And you can wash that one too. So then you think to yourself, well, the boss makes $1, I make a dime. That's why I go to the bathroom on company time. See, that's funny, right? And the boss's comment is really rude. It's really rude. But that's the reality of what happens. See, the attitude can lock up blessing in your life. Heaven doesn't laugh. Luke 16 says, if you are not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? So as an employee, it's just a gut check today. How do you treat your workplace and your boss? You can have a lot of influence there, one way or the other. If you cannot celebrate someone else's success, you're not ready for your own. God watches how you treat another person's blessing before he releases yours. It's true. I've witnessed in my own life. Work with excellence, not excuses. Show up early. Be dependable. Speak blessing, not curses. Make your boss's job easier. And celebrate when someone else is blessed. Pray over your workplace. Pray over your customers. Employees, you're not just an employee. You're a minister of the gospel where you work. You're a representative of Jesus. That's why when Monday morning rolls around, we're not just punching out from our spirituality. Heaven is watching. Joseph was promoted as a slave. Daniel was promoted as a captive. David was anointed when he was a shepherd. They didn't have it all figured out. They weren't ideal circumstances, but they were faithful, and faith attracts favor. Faith attracts favor. Now, we got another people group in this room, the retired folks. Yeah, they're like this. Some of you are counting down the days. Counting down the days. 5,749 days to go. But some of you remember that when he had a couple weeks left. You know, there's a man, it's John's brother Jerry. He worked at the same job in Stratford for 40 or 50 years. He was going in to his last day of work, and his motorcycle hit a horse and he died. True story. Yeah. And he didn't show up, and they didn't know what was going on because he was one of those dependable Christian employees. Now, he went home to be Jesus, to be Jesus. He went home to be with Jesus. But we never know. What are people going to think if we don't show up on that last day, right? Oh, that's usual. He's always late. No. They're like, something happened. But he'll be remembered. This was a long time ago already, but he'll be remembered as one of those great employees. But retired people, there is a divine promise that getting old is not the end of your impact. It's not. It isn't. And for all you retired people who say you're busy all the time, Tom Schiltz, Mike Gildenzoff, right? Doug Pence, yeah. We're busy all the time. Like, they'll say, I don't even know how I found time to work. Right? Yeah. God fills that void with other things. He really does. And it's a fun time of life. It really is. You get to take your skills and all the things you've learned, all those bruises and all those welts, and you can pour into other people. So just remember, retired people, you don't have to worry about getting old. There's still impact. Just pray the prayer of Moses. And even Caleb at 80 years old was taking nations and leading. At 80 years old. Who was the person that said their eyesight hadn't failed them? Was that Moses? Yeah. At an old age, his eyesight had never failed him. 120. Wow. Didn't even need glasses. Didn't even have glasses? Well, that's why I had to trust God so much more. That's for sure. Boy, that's why we have weak faith today, I tell you. So what is God asking you to do for a step of faith? Business owners, employees, retired people? Dream big. Dream big. Trust God. And if it doesn't work out, talk to all the other people that are in church today. They're still here. They made it. Right? Well, we got a little time. Open your Bibles to Hebrews 11. Now, we all get pumped up on the faith chapter. We read about all these great people of faith. Hebrews chapter 11. This one is free. It's not on any slides. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 35. Now, it just gets done listing all these great people of faith and how they got to see the promise. And then it says, there were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. So if you got any complaints today, I don't see anybody here sawed in two. Well, I trusted God. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world is not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. They stood the course. They trusted God. And when they drew their last breath, they were welcomed into the kingdom. Well done, good and faithful servant.